Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. Week 10 of the college football season has a ton at stake for the college football playoff race, of course, but also the Heisman Trophy race. Here's a look at the current odds to run away with the Heisman Trophy. Travis Hunter, you see, the two-way star for Colorado, just a slight favorite ahead of Oregon Ducks quarterback Dillon Gabriel. But for more on these current odds and the race from a betting perspective, let's turn things over to our Sportsline analyst, Mackenzie Brooks. Mackenzie, how are you?
Good, Jordan. Thanks for having me here. All right, so we're going to isolate the four front runners here because that really is what it feels like. It feels like a four-man race currently. Now, if you look at the gap between Gabriel and Ward, our two quarterbacks here, it doesn't seem like that big of a gap. But when you reverse engineer what the odds makers are saying, we start to realize that this gap is way bigger, and here's why. You look at the Heisman odds for Ward, as you saw over there, okay? That's plus 300. Plus 300 implies around a 25% chance to win. Now, you look at his odds to go undefeated because that is what he has to do in order to stay in this race. That's around plus 180, okay? Plus 180 is a 36% chance. These numbers should be the same. If all Ward has to do to lock in this award and stay in this race is go undefeated, his odds should be plus 180. They should be 36%, but we're seeing a 25% chance, and that's because the odds makers are telling us not only do you have to go undefeated, not only do you have to win out, you have to run statistical laps around this guy, Dillon Gabriel, over here. Dillon Gabriel at plus 250, all he has to do is win out. He has one factor that he's focused on. For Ward, it's two factors. It's not only winning out, but it's also just becoming the statistical dominant monster here on top of trying to win your game. So he has two factors to deal with, while Hunter, all he has to do is stay healthy and keep doing what he's doing. Genty, put up your normal 180 plus rushing yards. They're all focused on one thing. That's why it's so hard for Ward to win this award. So at plus 300, I just don't think it's worth it. Buy the extra 50 cents. Take Gabriel if you think it's a quarterback winning this award. So, Jordan, I'm kind of out on Cam Ward right now.
I love when you throw in the all they have to do, just all they have to do. I love it. Mackenzie, thanks so much. Great work as always. Well, I have a friend with us. Tom Fornelli, just joining us here on CBS Sports HQ. Taking a break from Cover 3 podcast. We are just honored. Tom, you just heard Mackenzie break it all down, this Heisman Trophy race from a betting perspective. So let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper here. Travis Hunter is the current favorite at the moment, coming off a career game. As we know, odds makers just really rooting for Hunter to run away with this. But should he be the favorite at this very moment?
You know, it's hard to say if anybody really should be the favorite right now because it does feel like every single week we have a new favorite, and it is based off of who had the best game last week. But I think that just goes to show how wide open the race actually is because nobody has really stepped forward and taken it, by the throat to claim themselves as the favorite week in and week out. But I think if you look at what the Heisman Trophy is about, it's for the best college football player. That is what it is at its core. And it's hard to argue that if you're just judging guys off of who the best college football player in the country is, Travis Hunter really seems to be the best college football player in the country. He's playing at wide receiver, he's playing at corner, and he's doing both exceptionally well to the point where when it comes to the NFL draft, we know he's going to be a top 10 pick. We just don't know what position the team that drafts him is going to plan on playing him at because he's that good at both. He could be a top 10 pick at receiver, he could be a top 10 pick at corner. And if you look at him, you can also argue nobody has played more college football this season than Travis Hunter. He has been on the field for 858 snaps.
Insane.
Nobody else in the country has played more than 675, and that's Buffalo linebacker Red Murdoch, who I just wanted to mention because Red Murdoch is an incredible name. It sounds like a 1975 television show police captain. But back to Travis Hunter. If you look at him, he's an incredible player. He's doing incredible things week in and week out. And more importantly, he's on a team that's winning. Colorado last season there was a lot of talk and a lot of hype around that team, but as the season wore on, they kept losing games and they kind of disappeared from the picture. That has not been the case for the Buffs this year. They are already bowl eligible. They are very much alive in the Big 12 title race. And if you're alive in a conference title race, that means you're alive for a playoff spot. So if the Buffaloes keep winning games and they can get to the Big 12 championship and they can get one of those playoff spots and Travis Hunter is playing the way he is playing, he is definitely going to be a name you hear about a lot in the Heisman in the weeks to come. But that's the key. He has to keep playing well, and his team has to keep winning games.
All right, we'll start getting used to it. Well, Travis Hunter, one of the non-quarterbacks in this race. The other is Ashton Genty. We'll get to him in just a moment, but I do want to focus on the quarterbacks. And let's start with Oregon quarterback Dillon Gabriel. He continues to just put up some big numbers, and he has a chance this weekend on CBS against Michigan to make history, Tom.
Yeah, Dillon Gabriel is he's been around, it feels like forever, because he has been. As you can see, he is 3 touchdowns shy of Case Keenum for the most touchdowns in history. And when it comes to a Heisman race, let's be honest, like, some of the voters watch every single game. They break it down. They spend hours meticulously pouring through the guy's resume to see who deserves to get their vote. And then there are voters who are just like, oh, that's a cool number. Oh, that's a cool record. So for Dillon Gabriel's case, to become the most touchdowns all time of any college football player in history would give him that kind of cachet with certain voters. And I think that he would deserve it, because if you've seen Gabriel this year, like his team, he got off to a slow start. He transfers there from Oklahoma. There was a slow start to the year, but they were having problems on their offensive line. As they have gotten healthier, that offense has gotten better, and so has Dillon Gabriel. He's been a big reason why. So he's starting to put up the kind of numbers that you see, and he's doing it in big games. You mentioned they're playing at Michigan this weekend. That's a very good defense. There's a lot we could say about the Michigan offense, but the defense is still good. So if he's able to put up those kind of numbers and lead the Ducks to a big win, that will only boost his profile. Now, the one thing that's working against him is after this week's game against Michigan, there really isn't another marquee matchup left on the schedule for the Ducks in the regular season. So we wouldn't really have that big game unless they reach the Big Ten championship, which would be the final game before the voting. And another factor is they're kind of playing too well. If you look at Oregon in recent weeks, they had the 1-point win at home over Ohio State, which was a close game throughout. But every single other game, they're blowing opponents out. The game is over at halftime, and Oregon is treating it that way. They're not coming out in the second half and keeping their foot on the gas the same way that a lot of teams have to. And if you look at Miami and Cam Ward, Miami's been in closer games, so he's been able to kind of, keep his stats going. So there is a question, like, how important is the Heisman to Dillon Gabriel? How important is it to Dan Lanning and the Ducks? Do we see them kind of, just run it up a little bit if the chance is there to boost those stats to, increase his case?
All right, we'll see how important it is, and if he makes history this weekend on CBS. That game, as you mentioned, Tom, in Ann Arbor, kickoff is slated for 3:30. All right, you did mention another guy, and that is quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes, Cam Ward. He continues to make his case in New York. He is also putting up some big numbers. He's one of the main reasons why this Miami Hurricanes offense leads the FBS right now in scoring. What has impressed you most this season about Cam Ward?
I think the most impressive thing about Cam, my biggest question mark with him was he's always been dynamic. He's always made incredible plays, but he also kind of made a lot of mistakes in previous stops where he would be a little too risky. And I was worried coming into Miami if he would kind of have that same approach where he took too many chances that he shouldn't be taking. And we have seen he has reined that in. He is not only putting up very good numbers and playing very well, he's not making mistakes. He is not putting his team in jeopardy. There are times where he's been pressured and he's made a couple bad throws, but every single quarterback in the country has done that. Dillon Gabriel has actually turned the ball over more times this season than Cam Ward. So if you look at his overall body of work, he's been very impressive. He's been exactly who Miami was hoping they would get. And in recent weeks, when that defense has started to struggle and the Hurricanes have found themselves in shootouts where they have to respond repeatedly to keep themselves in the game and win, Cam Ward has answered the bell every single time. He's gone out there. He has led touchdown drives. He has kept Miami undefeated. The problem working against him, though, is when it comes to winning the Heisman, you look for the quote-unquote Heisman moment. What is Cam Ward's Heisman moment? Because if you look at Miami's schedule, it's worked really well in their favor as far as getting to the playoff and winning the ACC, but they have yet to play a ranked team this season, and there is nobody left on their schedule who is currently ranked. So it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind situation for the Hurricanes on Saturday because they're not playing in the big games that everybody is watching. They tend to be playing on games that this week, is buried in primetime behind some other bigger games. So unless he puts up absolutely eye-popping numbers, it's hard for him to kind of maintain that momentum when Dillon Gabriel's playing in big games. Travis Hunter is doing incredible stuff. And then Ashton Genty is putting up, record kind of numbers that we're not used to seeing. So we do need to see if he's going to win this case. Miami obviously has to keep winning. They have to win the ACC, and preferably in the ACC championship, whether they're playing Clemson, SMU, or somebody else, he has to have a huge game in that spotlight while voters are watching before they turn their ballots in.
All right, we'll see if he can have some eye-popping numbers this weekend as Miami sees a familiar face in head coach for Duke, Manny Diaz, at Hard Rock Stadium. That game slated for a noon kickoff. All right, you also mentioned him, Ashton Genty. We got to talk about him. He's been so fun to watch this season. Awesome to see him chase history, but also guys like Barry Sanders' record. He did fall in the recent odds, though, but he remains in just a class of his own, Tom.
Yeah, he fell after last week's performance against UNLV because even though he finished with 130 yards, he only had 3.9 yards per carry. It was statistically his worst game. I don't know how much he or Boise State care because they still won the game, and it was the biggest game left on their schedule. So if you look at him, he's averaging nearly, 200 yards per game on the ground, and that comes down after last week's 131-yard performance. But we talk a lot about the Barry Sanders record, and I think on the surface, that is a huge thing. If he gets it, it's one of those kind of hallmark moments where voters can look at and say, he broke this record that's been around for 1,000 years at this point, and Barry Sanders is one of the greatest players of all time. But the difference is Barry Sanders did it in 11 games. He averaged 240 yards per game. Genty's at 197, so there's a difference there. But what's not mentioned as much, you hear that, you look at that yards per carry. Genty's at 8.7 yards per carry. Barry Sanders was only at 7.6. So while he played in fewer games, he also did it on more carries than what Genty is doing to this point. So in my mind, it is still very much an impressive mark, and it is one that will get him attention. But what works against him is, as I said, last week's game against UNLV was their biggest game of the year to this point, and he had his worst game of the season. And you look at the rest of Boise State's schedule, not a lot of marquee matchups on there. I don't know how much attention Boise State will be getting from the national media perspective or just from the casual viewer going forward. So this is a situation where for his Heisman candidacy, they have to keep winning games. He has to keep being spectacular, and Boise State has to win the Mountain West and get to the college football playoff, because just based on the way I have seen this thing go in recent years, if you are playing in a G5 level and you are not a quarterback, unless you are in the playoff conversation, you're probably not going to get enough votes to win the award. You might be a finalist, but I think he needs Boise State to get to the playoff. And the good news for him is, if Boise State gets to the playoff, there's going to be one primary reason why, and its name is Ashton Genty.
Most definitely. All right, well, last but not least, a guy who could be a little bit of a dark horse in this Heisman Trophy race is Penn State quarterback Drew Aller, currently 50-1 odds to win the Heisman. What can he do this weekend in a big game against a rival, Ohio State, to boost his candidacy?
I mean, I think it's pretty simple for Drew. Beat Ohio State. If you look at the situation, Penn State is undefeated. Drew has played well. We saw him a few weeks ago on the road in a big spot against USC play very well. If he has a good game and beats Ohio State, Penn State nearly locks up a spot in the Big Ten championship, and you will see his Heisman odds plummet from where they are now. He'll be closer to that top 5 range. He'll probably pass Cade Klubnik. So if you're looking for a long shot flyer, I would get it in on Aller before this Saturday's game against Ohio State, because if they do win, the odds are going to be a lot shorter.
All right. Sounds good to me. Tom Fornelli joining us here on CBS Sports HQ, breaking down the Heisman Trophy race. We appreciate it. You could catch more from Tom, Chip, Danny, Bud. Mackenzie and I also might make an appearance or two on the Cover 3 podcast. Scan that QR code right now to watch or listen wherever you get your podcasts.